Okay, good evening, everybody. We are up to Yudalid Amud Beis Maseches Berachos. All the way at the bottom, today's Amud is going to be Tesvav Amud Aleph 15a. We are starting the last line on Yudalid Amud Beis. So yesterday, the last Gemara that we learned was the Gemara. I talked about the importance of wearing tefillin while saying Kriya Shema. We had two different opinions as to what it should be compared to if a person says Kriya Shema without tefillin. One is like testifying falsely about oneself. The other one is like bringing a karban without the proper libations or the meal offerings that come along with it. The last line, Rabbi Yochanan. Continuing off Rabbi Yochanan, who told us something about Kriya Shema and tefillin, we have another statement from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, if a person wants to have proper acceptance of Ol Malchus Shemayim, so this next word here, shalema, means a complete Ol Malchus Shemayim. Here is the procedure, the recipe the person needs to follow for that to happen. Top of Tesvav and Aleph, 15a, Yifana, a person should relieve themselves in the morning. V'yitel yadav, wash his hands. V'yaniach tefillin, put on tefillin. V'yikra Kriya Shema, and he should read Kriya Shema. So this is a recipe for a person to be able to prepare themselves physically as well as spiritually for Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim. So the physical part of it is using the restroom. Also make sure that a person doesn't have any interruptions in the middle of davening, so he's properly prepared for davening. Yitel yadav, he washes his hands. Clearly, he has to be clean, but not just being clean. Yitel yadav means the person is spiritually clean, so he washes his hands with netilas yadayim. V'yaniach tefillin, put on tefillin. That's already preparing himself. That if you're accustomed to saying the l'shem yichud before putting on tefillin, also when a person understands the kavanah, the proper intentions a person is supposed to have while wearing tefillin, he understands that he dedicates his heart and his mind to the right place. Wearing tefillin helps a person dedicate his heart and mind to the right place. So all these things bring a person to the right place. In order to v'yikari Kriya Shema, to then say Kriya Shema, then he's properly prepared for Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim, Yispalel, and then he davens to Hashem. He recognizes to whom he's being mispalel. He understands all the shevach, the hadah, the bakasha that he's making to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and everything flows properly from there. V'zuhi Malchus Shemayim Shalema. If a person follows this, then he has fulfilled the opportunity to be able to be mikabel, to accept upon himself the Malchus Shemayim in a proper way. Amar Rabbi Bar Abba. Rabbi Bar Abba told us, Amar Rabbi Yochanan kol hanifna. Anybody who relieves himself, anot yadav, and washes their hands, umaniach tefillin, puts on tefillin, l'kori Kriya Shema, umispalel, and he davens. In other words, the person who follows the above procedure, male alav akasav ki'ilu banam mizbeach v'hikriv alav karban. It's not just that he was accepted upon himself proper Ol Malchus Shemayim, but it's as if he actually built a mizbeach, he built an altar, and brought a karban. Well, how do we know that? The chsiv, for it says in the pasuk, Erchatz binikayon kapi v'asovava es mizbechacha Hashem. Person will wash binikayon, with cleanliness, their hands, v'asovava, it's as if they surrounded the mizbeach of Hashem. Amar le Rava, lo savar lo marki lo toval. Is it not as if he actually was toval? He went to the mikveh, the chsiv, erchotz binikayon, v'lo chsiv architz kapi. In other words, it describes a proper nikayon, a person is totally clean. So, in other words, he's adding on that in addition to bringing a karban on his back, it's like he actually was tov on the mikvah. Now, Rashi points out that it doesn't actually mean that he becomes tahar. If a person's tameh, he doesn't become tahar through this. There's no shortcuts. A person needs to go to the mikvah. They need to go to the mikvah, but they get schar. They get rewarded as if they went to the mikvah. Gemara continues. Amar le Ravina le Rava. Ravina said to Rava, Chazimar haritzorva merabanan da'asim marav. Have you seen this Talmud Chacham, the scholar, who came from Rava, from Eretz Rava Amar, and he said, Mi she'ein lo mayim derechos yadav, somebody who does not have any water to wash his hands, mikaneach yadav ba'afar, he could clean his hands with afar, with dirt, ubitzrar, or with a rock, ubikismis, or with wood chips. So now, dirt obviously can't make his hands dirty, but dirt generally will have some type of rough surface that if his hands are dirty, he could rub some sand on it and his hands will become clean. Or any of these other substances that have a rough type of surface, a person could clean their hands properly by just rubbing it on all sides against this rough surface. Amar le shapir Amar. He said, yes, it's actually true, because miksiv erchatz b'mayim. Does it say a person will wash with water? It doesn't say that. Rather, b'nikoyon ksiv. It says a person will make himself clean. Kol midi demanki. Anything that makes a person clean is good for a person to do before they daven or before they say Kriya Shema. Why? The Gemara goes on to explain to Rav Chista light aman to mahader amaya beidin slusser. Chista would speak negatively and speak harshly against the person who spends too much time looking for water when it's time to daven. In other words, clearly what Rav Chista was worried about is if a person is going to get carried away with washing their hands, then they'll miss Zman Tefillah or Zman Kriya Shema. They're going to spend too much time with this. In other words, don't obsess over it. A person has water, wash your hands. You don't have water, you take some type of rough surface, even a beged, clothing, take your hands, rub it, clean yourself off, and then go in and daven. Now the Gemara, then the next line of the Gemara is a controversial line. Rashi clearly accepts this line, so therefore we'll say it, but Tosfos rejects it. Because the Gemara says, "V'hani milu the Kriya Shema," that's only with regard to Kriya Shema. Why? Because Rashi says Kriya Shema has an early Zman. So if you spend your time in the morning going to find water, again, we're talking about times when there's no public water, where you don't just have the opportunity to just turn water on your house. You may have to actually travel, 25 minutes, a half an hour to get running water. In such a case, you'll miss Zman Kriya Shema, so don't make yourself crazy. Aval tefillah, when it comes to tefillah l'mahadar, yes, a person should go out of the way to get the water. Now Rashi says something very strange here. He says, "The kol hayom zmanahu." The whole day a person could daven. Now the truth is, it's not really true. There is a zman tefillah. There is a point in time when tefillah is over. Well, I'm not sure if this is the pshat. What I'm thinking in my mind now is, it's possible. What Rashi means is, if a person misses tefillah, we have a concept called tashlumin. That means if a person can't properly daven, is not in a position to be able to daven, they're ones, so then if they miss Zman Tefillah, they can make it up by the next Tefillah. However, when it comes to Kriya Shema, there's no makeup on Kriya Shema. You miss it, you miss it. So it seems like that's what Rashi is saying. The way, if Rashi is going to actually include this line of the Gemara, Kriya Shema, you miss it, you're out. So therefore, don't waste your time. Don't spend your morning trying to find water. You don't have water, rub your hands on some type of cloth, take a paper towel, wipe your hands together, go ahead and say Kriya Shema. Tefillah, listen, if your hands are dirty, you got to find some water to clean it. If you miss Mount Tefillah, you make it up at Mincha. If you look at Tosfos actually just deletes the whole line, because Tosfos says it's not true. There's also Zman Tefillah. Got to make sure you daven on time. Don't spend all morning looking for water. You don't have water, go to shul and daven. The Gemara says, "Vad kama." How long should a person actually go out of their way to get water? Ad parsa, until the amount of time it takes to go a parsa, which is about 18 to 20 minutes. V'hani mili lekamei. That's only if he's able to continue going along his way. In other words, he's traveling. He has someplace to get to, so he should travel an extra 20 minutes to get there. Avol achorei. If a person's going backwards, in other words, you have to take a detour to go a different way. That, a filu mil ein chozer, you don't even have to go a mil. Sorry, a mil is about 18 minutes. A parsa is a little bit longer than that. So a person is not even required to go a mil out of his way. Umina, the Gemara says, from there we learn, mil hu deinu chozer. So we can just call a mil about 18 minutes. You don't have to go 18 minutes out of your way to get water. However, hapachas mimil, if it's 10 minutes, yeah, maybe you should take a 10-minute detour to get yourself some water to wash your hands. Next Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Akoriyas Shema. Person reads Kriya Shema, v'lo hishmiya la'azno. He did not articulate the words loud enough that he could actually hear himself saying the words of Kriya Shema. What's the halacha? Says the Mishnah, Yatsa, he has fulfilled his obligation, he's Yotza the mitzvah. Yossi Omer, Yossi disagrees, he says, Lo Yatsa, no, a person is not in fulfillment of the mitzvah of Kriya Shema if he just mouths the words, or just reads the words with his eyes, he has not fulfilled the mitzvah. Karav lo dik bos Yosea, person read it, but he wasn't careful to articulate each word, or enunciate each word properly. Rav Yossi Omer Yatsa, Yossi says, he is in fulfillment of his mitzvah. So while he said you're not Yotzei if you don't articulate it, he says you are Yotzei, even if you're not clear, if you're not careful to enunciate each word. Yehuda Omer Lo Yotzei. Yehuda says, no, you're not Yotzei. Karlam Afreya, a person who reads Kriya Shema backwards. We mentioned this before. We learned the Mishnah. Exactly what this means. Rashi seems to say at backwards mamish. He actually said the pasuk backwards in a way where it doesn't have any meaning. But the simple understanding is a person read the psukim backwards, the entire pasuk. He read the last pasuk first. Lo Yatza, he has not fulfilled his mitzvah. Kara V'ta, if a person read Kriya Shema and he made a mistake, so he made a mistake in the reading of the words, Yachzir L'makom Shata, he should go back to the place where he made the mistake. He does not have to repeat the entire Kriya Shema, just go back to the place where he made a mistake and continue on from there. The Gemara says, my time at Rabbi Yossi. What is the reason for Rabbi Yossi that he says if a person can't hear himself reading Kriya Shema, that he doesn't fulfill his mitzvah? The Gemara answers, Chsiv, for it says in the pasuk, Shema. Very interesting. It says Shema. It actually says in the Torah, Shema Yisrael. You should hear yourself say it. That's why you have to hear it. Gemara, and he understands, Hashme'el Aznecha, Masha Tamotzi Mipicha. You should hear in your ears what comes out of your mouth. V'tana Kama, and the first opinion of the Mishnah, Savar Shema B'chol Lashon. That means, as long as it's a language that you can be shomeh, that you can hear, that you understand, B'chol Lashon Sh'ata Shomeh, any language that you understand. In other words, he includes from Shema that you could say Kriya Shema in any language. Rabbi Yossi, according to Rabbi Yossi, how do you know that you could recite Kriya Shema in any language? Tarti Shema Mina. He says it's not mutually exclusive. You could have both things be true. Number one, you have to hear it. Number two, once you hear it, it could be in any language that you understand. Now the Gemara is going to analyze this idea of having to hear yourself when you have a mitzvah. So interestingly, there really aren't many mitzvahs that are mitzvahs that you have to hear. The only mitzvah midoraisa that we really know that a person has to hear is Tekiyah Shofar. That's the only mitzvah. Again, you think about other mitzvahs in the year, Kriyas and Megillah, the mitzvah is Kriya. It happens to be someone else could read it and have you in mind. So the Gemara is going to try to analyze other places where there would possibly be a mitzvah for a person to hear something. Tzanasam. We learned elsewhere. Charash hamedaber, a charash who can speak, so somebody who cannot hear, but he can speak. Veino shemea. So that's what it means. He's a charash who can't hear, but he can speak. The halacha is lo yitro. He should not take off truma. Vim taram truma so truma. If he did take off truma, then he has fulfilled his mitzvah. What's the reason why he shouldn't take off truma? The reason is because he has to make a bracha, and he won't be able to hear the bracha that he makes. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says that very clearly. Lo yitrum lefi she'eno shomea habracha shumavarach aleh. He won't be able to hear himself make the bracha. So therefore it sounds like, lechatchila, ideally, he should not be taking off truma at all. However, if he does, and he couldn't hear himself make the bracha, it's okay. The Gemara wants to know, who is going to be man tana, cheresh hamadaber veinu shemea di'evad in lechatchila lo. Who is the tana? Who is the one who's of the opinion that if you can't hear yourself make a bracha, it only works in hindsight. After the fact, it works. But lechatchila, ideally, before the fact, you shouldn't do it. Amar Rav Chisda says, Rabbi Yossi, it must be Rabbi Yossi. In other words, Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah, he tells us, who you are not in fulfillment of the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. You don't fulfill your mitzvah of Kriya Shema if you can't hear yourself. He must be the one who says that when it comes to Truma, it only works in hindsight after the fact. And he explains, it's Tnan. For it says in the Mishnah, Koriyas Shema, V'oshmiya la'azno, Yatza. Our Mishnah tells you if you don't hear yourself say Kriya Shema, you're Yotzi. Divri Rabbi Yehuda, those are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer, now our Mishnah doesn't actually say Divri Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah just says it straight. But the Gemara adds in Divri Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Lo Yatza, you have not fulfilled your mitzvah at all. So now, this is not really consistent with the Mishnah by Truma, because our Mishnah says, if you don't hear yourself say Kriya Shema, you're out. You have not fulfilled the mitzvah. However, when it comes to Truma, it says, the Chatchila, a person who can't hear himself make the bracha, should not take off Truma, but B'diavad it's fine. So it's not consistent. Now the Gemara is going to explain why that's not a problem. Because Ad Kan Lo Rabbi Yossi Lo Yatza, Rabbi Yossi only says that you're not in fulfillment of your mitzvah, El Gabi Kriya Shema Doraisa. That's by Kriya Shema, which is the mitzvah Midoraisa. Torah tells you have to say Kriya Shema every day. Aval truma, when it comes to truma, mishum brachahu. What's the problem? The bracha. Bracha d'Rabbanan. In other words, the mitzvah of truma is separating the truma. Midrabanan, you have to make a bracha when you do it. V'lo bebracha talya milsa. The fulfillment of the mitzvah is not dependent on whether or not he made the bracha. So therefore, in other words, it would stand to reason that Rabbi Yossi, who says when it comes to the fulfillment of a mitzvah, of Kriya Shema, that you're not yotze the mitzvah, you can't hear yourself, he probably is the one who says that if you can't hear yourself make a bracha, then it's not lechatchila, it's not ideal that you should be the one taking off truma. But in hindsight, after the fact, it will be okay. The Gemara says, hold on. That's a bit of a stretch. Mimaydu Rabbi Yossi, who says that Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi? Dilma, maybe Rabbi Huda. That Mishnah actually follows Rabbi Huda. How would that be? And our Mishnah tells us you're Yotze. Well, you know what? Maybe in our Mishnah also, a person should say Kriya Shema loud enough that they'll be able to hear it. Now, if you don't, you fulfill the mitzvah. Teda, let's actually bring a raya to that. Dikatani, it says in the Mishnah, Ha-korei, a person who already read Kriya Shema and he didn't hear himself, di'evet in lechatchila lo. In other words, if it happened already after the fact, yatsa, he has fulfilled his mitzvah. Lo amri, hai dikatani no, the Gemara says lo, not true. Amri, hai dikatani ha-korei, the reason why it said in our Mishnah, a language which is b'di'eved, which is after the fact, is not because Rabbi Yehuda says that l'chatchila you have to actually hear yourself. Rather, the reason why it says it is lo diach hakocho Rabbi Yossi, to bring out how machmir Rabbi Yossi actually is. The Amar di'eved namilo. In other words, the reason why it says a case of after the fact is because the Mishnah wanted to tell you Rabbi Yossi is so machmir on this case that he says even after the fact, you have not fulfilled your mitzvah. But it's not to tell you that Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that lechatchila you have to hear yourself say Kriya Shema. Rather, it goes all the way mikatza lakatza, from one extreme to the next. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion lechatchila you don't even have to hear yourself say Kriya Shema. Reb Yossi is of the opinion that even b'di'eved, if you didn't hear yourself, but you said Kriya Shema but didn't hear yourself, you're not yotzis. So you have from one extreme to the next. Now that's the case. Again, the Rabbi Yehuda for Rabbi Yehuda afilu lechatchila nami yotze. The Gemara says, hold on. B'mayu kimta, Rabbi Yossi. So it comes out that you're telling me that the Mishnah by Truma that says that cheresh, a person who can't hear but can speak, that follows Rabbi Yossi. Hold on a second. You're telling me that is Rabbi Yossi? Falhad the Tanya that it says in the Brisa. Lo yivarech adam berachas hamazon. We'll take another example. The Brisa says lo yivarech adam berachas hamazon belibo. A person should not say berachas hamazon bench in his heart. In other words, just read it with your eyes, but say it in your heart by heart. Then birech, if you did yatsa, you fulfilled your mitzvah. Mani. Who does that follow? Lo Rabbi Yossi. It's not Rabbi Yossi because Rabbi Yossi says even b'di'eved you're not yotze. For lo Rabbi Yehuda, it's not Rabbi Yehuda either. Why did Rabbi Yehuda ha'amar lechatchila nami yatsa? You even allowed to do it lechatchila. So who's this middle category that says that lechatchila don't do it, but b'di'eved it's fine? Just lost the place for a second. Lechatchila nami yatsa. Rabbi Yossi di'eved nami lo elamai. Who must it be? Rabbi Yehuda. It must be Rabbi Yehuda. U'di'eved in lechatchila lo. Elahad Tanya. Let's go back a line. V'imberach yatsa mani lo Rabbi Yossi. Can't be Rabbi Yossi. Lo Rabbi Yehuda. Why do you Rabbi Yehuda? If it would be Rabbi Yehuda ha'amar lechatchila nami yotze, you're yotze even lechatchila. You Rabbi Yossi. If you're telling us Rabbi Yossi di'eved nami lo, he's not yotze even b'di'eved. The Gemara says elamai. So what are you going to suggest? Who is it? Rabbi Yehuda. Must be Rabbi Yehuda. U'di'eved in lechatchila lo. That Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that when it says read that if you didn't hear yourself say Kriya Shema, it's okay. B'di'eved b'nad lechatchila. So hold on. Now we have another problem because now we're going to find the place where it says it works lechatchila. Elahad Tanya Yehuda b'reidiv Shimon ben Pazi Omer. Cheresh hamedaber. A cheresh, a person who's deaf but can speak. The eino shomei. Oh, hamedaber. Yeah, he could speak v'eino shomei. He can't hear himself. What's the halacha? It says clearly, Torem lechatchila. He can actually do it lechatchila. So now, if you told me Rabbi Yehuda is only b'di'eved, and Rabbi Yossi is even b'di'eved, no, then no one is going to work with this one. Samani lo Rabbi Yehuda lo Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda ha'amar diavad in l'chatchila lo. If you can try to make that Mishnah fit with Rabbi Yehuda, he says it only works b'diavad. Rabbi Yossi amar diavad ami lo. If you're following Rabbi Yossi, he says even after the fact it's not going to work. El Liolam, rather, we must say Rabbi Yehuda. It is Rabbi Yehuda. V'afilu l'chatchila nami, and even l'chatchila, if you don't hear yourself, it's still going to work. For lokasha, there's no stira. Hadi day. Hada Rabbi. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda sometimes is going to say it lichatchila. Sometimes he's going to say b'diavad. Why? Because sometimes he was speaking his own opinion. Sometimes he was talking about his Rebbe's opinion. Who is the Rebbe that we're talking about? It's Tanan. For it says in the Mishnah, Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Hakore Shema Es Shema Tzarach Sheashmiya LaOzno. Clearly, Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, person who reads Kriya Shema actually has to hear it. Shenamar, for it says in the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Amar lo Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir responded. Here's Rabbi Meir. Hareyu Omer Asher Anochi Mitzavach Hayom Al Livavecha. It says Al Livavecha, which means the most important part of this is what's in your heart, which means Achar Kavanas Halev Heinein Advarim. So now we have both opinions. We have the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, it says, L'chatchila, it has to be articulated. And then you have Rabbi Meir's opinion, who says that it goes after what's in your heart, not what comes out of your mouth. So therefore we have both opinions. And Rabbi Yehuda could have been speaking either his own opinion or the opinion of his Rebbe. So Gemara says, okay, if that's the case, once you mention this opinion of Rabbi Meir, Filatem Rabbi Yehuda, Karabe Spirale, could say Rabbi Yehuda holds like his Rebbe, and he's of the opinion that L'chatchila, you should always articulate it. B'diavad, it's okay if you didn't. And now, V'lo kasha Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, we actually get it to fit through Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, you could fit. Now we have Tanoim for every one of these Mishnayos. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that L'chatchila, you should hear yourself. B'diavad, if you don't, it's fine. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that L'chatchila, you don't even have to hear yourself. It's always okay as long as you say it in your heart. And Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion that if you actually can't hear yourself, you have not discharged your obligation. Yot the mitzvah, we will stop here. 3 lines from the bottom. Have a wonderful evening. Have Freilichen Zos Chanukah, and have a good Shabbos.